What's happening, everybody? Tyrone Bowman live. We're just getting started here on this Thursday evening. And welcome to the program. I'm just waiting to for a few more people to come on because I want to get this program started. I'll be bringing analysis and commentary about the the death of the now deceased Renee Nicole Good, who was murdered by the ICE agent down in Minneapolis. So I have a lot of ground to cover. Protesting is going on after the shooting. The GoFundMe campaign has raised a significant amount of monies, and the spin meisters in Washington, D.C. are trying to spin it and blame her for what happened to try to make it that the agent is the hero. So let's get started here. So I'll be bringing some articles from different sources, but we got to talk about it. So before I do that, I am going to say this. Midterm elections are coming up in November. Good evening. Midterm elections are coming up in November. And I'm going to bring a real good, solid commentary and editorial about what's at stake in the upcoming midterm elections. And the one thing I'll say tonight is that, ladies and gentlemen, we must remain focused. You have to be vigilant. We cannot allow ourselves to be misguided, bamboozled, hoodwinked, or distracted by the foolery that's going on in politics. It is clearly evident that the compromising, do-nothing Republicans are going to continuously try to make it appear like they're the party for the people, and they're going to try to demonize and bastardize the Democrats. This is what they're trying to do. And they're going to continue to lie, deceive people, and deflect. And they're going to continue to pretend like everything is wonderful here in America. Well, the shocking thing that's going to happen, you can mark my word on it, you can go to the bank on this one, there is going to be unprecedented millions of people who are going to come out and vote in November, and many of the people in MAGA are going to vote against them. They've had enough. So let's get started. According to USA Today, an article written by Mike Sender, a GoFundMe campaign for the family of Renee Nicole Good. They're using the word killed, but I'm going to use the word murdered, who was murdered by an ICE agent, has raised over $700,000 thus far. A GoFundMe campaign for the family of Renee Nicole Good, who was killed January 7 in Minneapolis, has raised more than $700,000. The campaign started on yesterday aims to support the wife and son of Renee Good as they grapple with the devastating loss of their wife and mother, according to its description. Good was shot while in her Honda SUV by an unidentified Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE agent on Wednesday in a residential neighborhood south of downtown Minneapolis. Well, that is misleading because they already know who the agent is. They already have his photo being plastered across social media. USA Today is trying to take the safe route for whatever reason, but he's not identified. They know exactly who he is. So it's no big secret. President Donald Trump and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem have said the agent was acting in self-defense. That's the narrative that they're going to play. That's the hand they're going to play, and that's their story, and they're going to stick to it. However, videos taken by eyewitnesses have led many to decry the shooting as unwarranted. The Minneapolis City Council put out a statement saying Good was out caring for her neighbors this morning and her life was taken today at the hands of the federal government, quote, close quote. Good, who was 37, lived with her parents in Minneapolis, just a few blocks from where she was fatally shot. The Minnesota Star Tribune reported she was a mother of three, a 15-year-old daughter and two sons, ages 12 and 6, according to the Washington Post. Listen, millions upon millions of people have seen the video. It speaks for itself. You can't suppress it. You can't hide it. You can't try to skirt the issue. We all saw what happened. It was live. It was unedited. We know exactly what happened, and we saw how it went down. So people can lie about it. They can try to pretend that she was a domestic terrorist. She was trying to attack an ICE agent and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So Good, who was a poet, also hosted a podcast with her husband, at the time, comedian Tim Macklin, when she lived in Colorado Springs. The Star Tribune reported Good shared one son, the 6-year-old, with Macklin, who died in 2023, the outlet reported. So she's a widow. Good's mother told the Star Tribune that her daughter was extremely compassionate and not the type of person to confront ICE agents. Quote, Renee was one of the kindest people I've ever known, she said. She was extremely compassionate. She's taken care of people all her life. She was loving, forgiving, and affectionate. She was an amazing human being, end quote. And I'm going to say this. When the murder of George Floyd occurred at the hands of now convicted former officer Derek Chauvin, there was such an outcry across America. What happened to Renee Nicole Good, in my personal opinion, is horrible. Unnecessary. Even when people tried to get a doctor who was on site to go to tend to her wounds and to make sure that, she could get stabilized, they wouldn't allow the doctor to. And what happened to her? It is going to be the catalyst for change in this nation. Whether people want to believe it or not, whether they want to accept it or not. And this is the appalling part. You got people out there happy that this happened. They are clapping and cheering. We know who they are. The MAGA racism. Until it comes to their town, their city, their neighborhood, and when it affects people that they know, now they want to do something about it. A mother of three. And they're blaming her for what happened. They're trying to demonize her in the wake of her death. Verbally ostracize her. Somebody asked me, was Charlie Kirk's murder okay? Listen up, stupid. Let me just talk to you directly. If your dumb behind had been here when I talked about the murder of Charlie Kirk and 27,000 people watched it live, you would know exactly how I felt about it. This has nothing to do with Charlie Kirk. I'm talking about Renee Nicole Good. That's who I'm talking about right here, right now. And I'm going to give full attention to her the same way I did with passion, criticizing those who assassinated Charlie Kirk. I've said over and over again that what happened to him, regardless of his political ideology or his views, it should have never happened. Point blank. What happened to her should have never happened. It was wrong in every essence of the word. And the agent walked off as if nothing ever happened. And he claimed he's in the hospital. And et cetera, et cetera. So keep telling those lies. So her mother said she was one of the kindest people she's ever met. As of January 8th, the GoFundMe campaign for Good's family has raised over $718,000 with more than 17,000 donations. Donations have come from beyond the United States, with commenters saying they reside in Canada, the UK, and Germany. Minneapolis City Council member Jason Chavez posted on social media or Chavez rather, posted on social media that he had vetted the GoFundMe campaign, quote, please support the wife and son of Renee Good as they grapple with the devastating loss of their wife and mother. May she rest in peace. USA Today contacted the GoFundMe organizer, Maddie Weiss, and Chavez on today rather, but have not yet received a response. And I'm going to find out myself how I can be a contributor to the GoFundMe campaign to help the family. Here's another article written by USA Today. Was ICE agents' use of force reckless? Experts analyze Minneapolis shooting. This article was written by Christopher Kane. An immigration and customs enforcement agent shot and killed a 37-year-old woman, and she's not going to be called a 37-year-old woman anymore. Her name is Renee Nicole Wilson. That's her name. Make sure I got her name correct, because I'm going to be saying it a lot throughout this broadcast. No, she's not going to be the woman. She has a name. Renee Nicole Good. That is her name. She's not going to be called that woman. She wasn't that woman. She's a living, breathing human being until yesterday. Renee Nicole Good was mother, the wife, an all-around loving, kind, compassionate person. So her murder was sparking protests as the Trump administration claimed self-defense, and local and state authorities said the agent acted recklessly. The January 7th fatal shooting, which occurred less than a mile from where George Floyd was killed by a police officer in 2020, less than 1 mile. Less than 1 mile away. 2,000 ICE agents descended upon Minneapolis. I don't see any ICE agents going in any Republican-led cities. Republican governors are causing all kind of mayhem and confusion and pandemonium. They're not being called on the carpet because it's acceptable. And people are trying to make it like that this is the norm in America. This is not the norm in America. I'm concerned about what's going on here, right now. Her death was wrong in every essence of the word. The question I ask, suppose it was the other way around, then what? They'd be out screaming, law and order, protect the police, do everything we can to make sure law enforcement has more guns, more battering rams, more pepper spray, more shields, more batons. Law enforcement has its place, but violently and recklessly enforcing the law is not one of them. See, some of you who watch this program, you're pro-law enforcement. You don't care what they say or do, as long as it doesn't affect you. But when it starts affecting you, your family, your friends, and your relatives, you are going to have a different side of opinion. Just like my people during the civil rights movement, they were spit on, beaten down, hosed. Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy went to prison 39 times. Rosa Parks was arrested just for sitting in a seat and refusing to give it up to a white racist. The thousands upon thousands of white people who were injured and beat up and killed during the civil rights movement. The racist, bigoted Bull Connor. And don't forget the racist, bigoted Governor George Wallace at the time. All the trouble that they caused in this nation. And people try to justify it. For what? Because people wanted voting rights? Because they got tired of Jim Crow? Because they were tired of segregation? They got tired of being treated like second-class citizens? My ancestors who were in slavery didn't get anything for the servitude, but punishment, heartache, pain, and death. That's it. The wealth that America has today was built on the back of slaves and slave labor. Now, you can take it any way you want. I don't care. It's still true anyway. So, the fatal shooting, which occurred less than a mile from where George Floyd was killed by police officer Derek Chauvin in 2020, has spurred questions around the use of force by federal agents. How many more times are we going to have this conversation? They don't care. It doesn't matter. Excessive force, over excessive force, it's going to continue to be that way. And the only reason why you hear the law and order mantra, the drums beating, because Republicans want to appeal to the law enforcement community to help them to keep the Congress and the Senate. Meanwhile, they're doing everything they can to make sure everyday people in America can barely hold their head above water and breathe without an apparatus. What about inflation? What about Medicare and Medicaid? What about them right now getting the vote to strip and gut the Affordable Health Care Act? What about the thousands upon hundreds of thousands of mothers who need SNAP benefits to put food on the table? How about the millions of people who have lost their jobs within the last year here in this country? Foreclosure on houses. Greedy, rotten, thieving, lying, cheating corporate CEOs are still getting hundreds and hundreds of dollars and even millions of dollars in governmental contracts. Meanwhile, the average citizen is finding it even hard to find a job for those that want to work. And you're going to try to convince me that this is what you voted for? Is that the lie you want to continue to tell yourself to try to make yourself feel better? No, you didn't vote for this carnage. You didn't vote for high inflation. You didn't vote for high gas prices. You did not vote for high unemployment. You voted because you wanted black people to, quote unquote, to be put in their place. That's what you voted for. You voted out of your hatred for now former Vice President Kamala Harris. And now it's coming back to bite you. But your pride and your arrogance and your avarice won't allow you to admit that you're wrong. You mucked up. That's what you did. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty back together again. You can't undo the mess that you made. The video circulated online shows multiple law enforcement officers approaching Renee Nicole Good's SUV, which was stopped in the middle of a street where demonstrators had gathered that morning to protest heightened immigration operations. One officer attempts to open the driver's side door as someone is heard saying, quote, "Get out of the blanking car." Good briefly reverses before driving forward, beginning to turn right. As the vehicle begins to move forward, another officer standing near the front driver's side draws his gun and fires multiple times. At the moment the shots were fired, the wheels of Good's vehicle are turned to the right, angled away from the officer in front of the vehicle. It is unclear from the video whether the officer was struck. The officer was not struck. President Donald Trump, a Homeland Security Secretary, Noam said he was. Videos show the vehicle heading down the road before crashing into other cars and colliding with a pole. Good was soon declared dead. She wasn't killed, she was declared dead. Federal officials said the agent was treated at a hospital and later released. Diane Goldstein, former police lieutenant, an executive director of the nonprofit Law Enforcement Action Partnership, reviewed footage of the shooting and described the Agen tactics as, quote, aggressive. Law enforcement policy should always be about using the least amount of force and preserving people's lives, Goldstein told USA Today. She added that the footage suggests a lack of supervision, a lack of training, and a lack of understanding of what other tactics are available to de-escalate these types of situations. It was never about de-escalation, it was about a show of force. That's what it was about. Aggressive enforcement tactics can make officers less safe rather than more, she previously told USA Today. Other use of force experts pointed to the Department of Homeland Security policies would state that agents should minimize risk and avoid placing themselves into positions in which they have no alternative to using deadly force. These agents are told to do just what they're doing. That's why they're doing it in this manner, because they've been instructed. But one day, they're going to all answer for their actions. Republicans will not always be in power. See, that's what people don't seem to understand, because the tide is beginning to turn. And it's going to turn in a powerful way. Being black in America, I can tell you now, from growing up, how many times did I see us, no matter how many times we complied with the police and do everything they asked, nothing but brutality came. We have one of the racist mayors in the history of Philadelphia. He's now dead, Frank L. Rizzo, who was notorious as a cop, who rose up to the ranks and became mayor of the city of Philadelphia. Then he tried to rebrand himself as a compassionate man after all the devastation and carnage that he caused for black people over the decades. When Mayor Wilson Good became the first black mayor of Philadelphia, we didn't forget him. No, we were not going to vote for him, because we have long memories. As I said earlier, this is the catalyst that's going to propel a powerful movement leading up to the midterms. And the Republicans are going to lose Congress, and they're going to lose the Senate. You can believe it or don't believe it. It's going to happen. The balance of power in Washington is going to change. According to the expert, it clearly looks like she was driving away, said Jeffrey Albert, an expert on high-risk policing at the University of South Carolina. She turned her wheel and looked like she was trying to escape. The Trump administration has defended the agent's actions, describing the incident as a, quote, act of domestic terrorism, end quote, and claiming the woman, quote, weaponized her vehicle. Noam said the agent used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues, end quote. Unbelievable. Local and state officials in Minneapolis disputed the government's description of the shooting, calling it propaganda and saying video shows the agent recklessly using power that resulted in somebody dying. Law enforcement agencies have long regarded vehicles as deadly weapons, but over recent decades, high-profile incidents have led local police departments and federal agencies to warn against firing at moving vehicles, saying it should be a last resort. Many agencies have banned the practices in most instances. Justice Department policy says officers cannot fire at a moving vehicle unless there's no other objectively reasonable means of defense appear to exist, which includes moving out of the path of the vehicle. ICE partner agency, the Department of Homeland Security, says firing at a driver is prohibited unless there's a reasonable belief that the subject of such forces poses an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury, according to a use of force policy from 2023. And let me just go on to say all the MAGA Republican networks are going to have all these people on their networks, and they're going to sit there and lie, and they're going to sit there and pretend like nothing's wrong, everything is wonderful. They're already doing it, and they're going to do it even more. They're going to make the rounds throughout the duration of the week. And then when they have her funeral, they're going to send some half-hearted condolences for political points, acting like they really care. Well, when people vote against them in November, then they'll find out that they don't care about them. Similar policies are in place across dozens of local police agencies nationwide, including in New York City, home of the nation's largest police force, which banned the practice of shooting at moving vehicles in the 1960s. All right, here's another article I want to get into. Let's talk about the ICE agent who killed Renee Nicole Good. According to The Guardian, the headline reads, the article is written by Ali Winston. The agent involved in the lethal shooting of 37-year-old Renee Nicole Good during an immigration sweep in Minneapolis yesterday is Jonathan David Ross. According to court records that closely match the description of a June 2025 incident involving the agent in Bloomingdale, Minnesota, cited by the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and J.D. Vance. Ross is a Minneapolis resident and 10-year veteran of the Enforcement and Removal Operations Special Response Team. The death of Good, a mother of three, sparked outrage in Minneapolis and strident rebukes from Minnesota officials, and on Capitol Hill, thousands of people gathered in protest near the site of the shooting Wednesday night. And some Democrats on Capitol Hill have threatened to withhold funding to the Department of Homeland Security. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey said on Wednesday, quote, to ICE, get the out of Minneapolis, end quote. Federal officials have so far refused to identify the officer, though the Minneapolis Tribune first identified Ross on Thursday. The Federal Bureau of Investigation also refused on Thursday to involve Minnesota law enforcement in the investigation of Good's killing, prompting the governor, Tim Walz, to say it feels very, very difficult that we will get a fair outcome. The Department of HS did not respond to multiple requests. Noem called Good's actions, quote, this is coming from the Homeland Secretary, an act of domestic terrorism, and accused her of blocking in federal agents with a vehicle before the lethal shooting, but also indicated that the agent involved had been dragged. This story just keeps getting out of hand. By a vehicle during an enforcement operation last year. Vance also said during a press conference or briefing at the White House today that the unarmed agent was dragged by a car 6 months ago and shared specific details. What does that have to do with what happened yesterday? So because he was allegedly dragged 6 months ago, that means he had the right to kill her. So is that the insinuation here? This is a dude who wants to be your next president. No empathy for the family, no sympathy, no condolences for her mother and her three children that she left behind. None. They just want to praise the cop and glorify him and put him on a pedestal. You did a great thing. You killed somebody. Kudos to you. No prayers being offered for her family. And these are the people who call themselves Christians. Yet a mother of three is now dead. How do they explain to her children that their mother will no longer be there? Videos of the shooting shared widely on social media, showing Good attempting to turn her red SUV around and leave the scene as a federal agent attempts to force open her passenger door. An ICE agent can be seen earlier walking around the car's passenger side, from the rear towards the front of the car on the driver's side with his phone in his left hand. He leans forward and fires 4 shots from his gun. I'm not going to call it a pistol, it's a gun. At Good. The car speeds away and crashes a short distance later into a parked car in the snow. According to court records, Ross was involved in the June arrest of Roberto Carlos Munoz, an undocumented Mexican immigrant with an open immigration detainer and a criminal conviction for sexually assaulting his 16-year-old stepdaughter in 2022. Munoz was contacted at his residence in Bloomingdale, Minnesota, by a group of federal agents on the 19th of June of 2025. What does this have to do with what happened yesterday? All the spinning and deflection is not going to negate the fact that Renee Nicole Good is dead. Now, people can pretend that didn't happen. They can pretend that doesn't matter. Here's a story from the Wall Street Journal. Pulling it up now. You know, a lot of people believe in fairy tales. They still think they're children. There's no Easter Bunny. There is no Tooth Fairy. There's no Santa Claus. There are no eggs on the lawn. And a lot of people think it's okay to do certain things as long as it doesn't happen to them or to their family, their friends, in their neighborhood. According to the article in the Wall Street Journal, this is the headline. Quote, J.D. Vance defends ICE agent who shot Minneapolis woman who shot Renee Nicole Good, saying he has absolute immunity. The vice president says Renee Nicole Good was a victim of left-wing ideology. Governor Tim Walz slams decision to exclude state officials from the probe. This article was written by Joseph D. Avila, Joe Barrett, and Michelle Hackman for the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Vice President J.D. Vance said that the ICE agent responsible for Wednesday's fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good in Minnesota was doing his job as a federal officer and is protected by absolute immunity. That's what he said. During a lengthy appearance in the White House briefing room today, Vance defended the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer and criticized Renee Nicole Good, who was killed. Renee Nicole Good, calling her a victim of left-wing ideology. How about right-wing racism? Quote, I can't believe that her death is a tragic. Listen, this is what the vice president says. I can believe that her death is a tragedy while also recognizing that it's a tragedy of her own making, end quote, the vice president said. She's responsible for her own death. That's what he said. Let that sink in for a minute. So basically, he's saying she deserved to be killed. The death of Renee Nicole Good sparked protests in Minneapolis demanding immigration enforcement agents leave the city, while local officials have challenged the Trump administration's version of events. The Department of Homeland Security said the agent fired in self-defense after Good attempted to run over officers, but state and city officials have disputed that version of events after videos on social media raised questions about whether Good was attempting to flee the scene rather than harm anyone. Let me tell you something. As a criminal justice major, as a law student, I watch hundreds of videos all the time. I do a lot of reading about a lot of stuff. A lot of the stuff that's theoretical in the textbooks that I read are disputed because it's not comparable to what's going on in the real world. So because they say she deserved to be killed, basically that's what they're insinuating. They said, oh, she attempted to run over the officials. Speaking at a press conference in New York about an unrelated ICE operation, Noam reiterated her characterization of Good's actions as an act of domestic terrorism. Well, she's going to have to keep saying it because that's what they want people to psychologically and psychoanalytically to believe. And that phraseology is to appeal to the MAGA people. That's why they're going to keep saying it over and over and over again. So, tell me, women in the Republican Party don't have no empathy for a mother who was killed? No condolences whatsoever? Are these people that hardened, that callous, that bitter, that hateful, that they're happy that she got murdered? Of course, the Homeland Security Secretary said that Good had several years of experience. He acted according to his training, adding that an internal investigation into the officer's conduct is continuing. That will be wiped under the rug and thrown in the trash. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz denounced the FBI's decision to exclude the state from the investigation, saying any probe that doesn't include state law enforcement can't be trusted. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension said it was notified that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, would solely handle the examination of Wednesday's fatal shooting, would no longer provide state law enforcement with access to case materials or evidence. This is a cover-up. You don't have to believe it. That's what it is. It's a cover-up. You can call it hate all you want. I have a right to speak my opinion just like you have a right to speak yours. I don't have to agree with the Republicans. I don't have to agree with anything they say or anything that they do. Nothing. I don't have a reason to agree with them. And Charlie Kirk has nothing to do with this conversation, and I'm not going to bring him in it. You want to talk about Charlie Kirk? You go over to Turning Point USA, and you can sit down with all of them, and y'all can talk about Charlie Kirk all you want. So, quote, without complete access to the evidence, witnesses, and information collected, we cannot meet the investigative standards that Minnesota law and the public demands. Drew Evans, the state agency's superintendent, said Thursday. As a result, the BCA has reluctantly withdrawn from the investigation. The FBI's Minnesota office didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. I don't want to quote nothing else from that woman. Governor Tim Walz said today, I say that only because people in positions of power have already passed judgment, from the president to the vice president to Kristi Noem, have stood and told you things that are verifiably false, quote, close quote. Vance questioned the legality of whether Minnesota officials could press charges against the ICE officer. The unprecedented thing is the idea that a local official can actually prosecute a federal official with absolute immunity. I've never seen anything like that. It would get tossed out by a judge. The Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Fry, repeated his criticism of ICE operation in the interviews, calling the narrative described by Noam and President Trump BS, end quote. Quote, the way that ICE is behaving is reckless, not just in this incident, but in numerous others. Fry said in an interview with CNN, the chief and I have been saying, not just privately, but very publicly, for well over a month, that something like this was going to happen. And guess what? It's going to continue to happen across the nation. It's not going to stop. It's going to get even worse because now they're going to feel emboldened and more empowered to continue to do what they're doing. The mayor continued to say in Minneapolis, this is not just about Minneapolis, but this is about the endurance of our republic. The things that are happening are not just illegal, they are unconstitutional. What they are doing is terrorizing communities, quote, close quotes. Dozens of protesters gathered outside the federal Whipple building on Thursday following overnight vigils, where hundreds gathered to mourn Good. More than 100 heavy armed federal officers were on site at the federal building's parking lot. Greg Bovino, the Border Patrol commander, who has led militarized immigration operations in Los Angeles and Chicago, walked along the line of officers prompting taunts from the protesters. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to close by saying this. I've read enough of this article. The only way you send a direct message to the politicians in Washington is in the upcoming midterm elections. Vote them out of power. That's how you do it. Vote them out of power. And then you can bring change. Never surrender. Never quit.